Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Graham Wilson. I'm Director of the Initiative on Cities at Boston University, and I'm here to welcome you to the seminar on cities, multilingual learners and families. The COVID crisis has been an urban crisis largely, at least so far, and cities have faced many problems in dealing with the disease. But we know that the disease has not affected everybody equally. It has been unequal in its impact, and it has hit particularly hard people who are already facing challenges. And that's why today we are focusing on multilingual learners and families. Just a few words about the Initiative on Cities. We were created 6 years ago, and our job is to bring together people across Boston University who are interested in working on cities and helping to build better cities for the future. We promote research by Boston University faculty and graduate students. And we also exist to break down the barriers that can exist between academics and experts on the one hand, and practitioners of urban governance on the other. So we are very much in the business of trying to put expertise at the service of the people who live in our nation's cities. I'm delighted that we have today Christine Leider, who is going to be not only a speaker, but she's also going to be moderator for the seminar. But before Christine starts to speak, I'm going to ask my colleague from the Initiative on Cities, David Gross, to go over some of the housekeeping issues with you, how to ask a question, and all the other good Zoom-related stuff with which you may or may not now be familiar. David.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. Just a few quick notes. We will do a Q&A session after all the speakers have had a turn. But you can submit a Q&A, a question for our Q&A session at any time. If you look at the bottom of your Zoom window, on the right side, there'll be a button that says Q&A, and you can type your question in. You can upvote questions submitted by other attendees that you would like panelists to answer, or if you wanted to ask the same question instead of asking a redundant question. And we will do our best to answer as many questions as possible. It is helpful if you can get your questions in while the presentation is happening. So right when we start Q&A, we have questions available. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Chris.
Great, thank you. Just a second. All right, so let's get started. So thank you for having us today. We are so very excited to be here. My name is Christine Monticello Leider, and I'm a clinical assistant professor in the Wheelock College of Education and Human Development at Boston University. I'm so excited to be here with a few fabulous alumni from BU Wheelock who are also amazing educators in Massachusetts. In our time together, we will start with a brief introduction of multilingual learners and families, and then you will have time to learn from Rani Pan, Jocelyn Lee, and Emily Blitz on the challenges that multilingual learners and families have faced in distance education and ways that their schools and districts have been working to meet those challenges. So with that, I wanted to start with a brief overview. Who are multilingual learners? Multilingual learners are a very diverse population of students. While many multilingual learners are immigrants, contrary to popular belief, the majority were actually born in the United States. Of students who are immigrants, that can include students with limited or interrupted formal schooling, students who came to the US voluntarily, and also students who came involuntarily. This can also include students who are unaccompanied and or undocumented. Both immigrants and US-born multilinguals can be non-English learners and also English learners. English learners are students who are receiving ESL services. That is, they receive targeted English language development because they are still learning English, and that can include newcomers who are immigrants who've been in the US for 1 to 3 years, and also long-term English learners who are students who have been classified as English learners for 6 years or longer. Non-English learners can include students who are formerly English learners and have now been reclassified, and students who have never been classified as English learners. So as you can see from here, there's a lot of variation in the experience among the multilingual learner population. Some fast facts about multilingual learners and families. There are 5 million English learners in US public schools with Spanish, Arabic, Chinese, and Vietnamese being the most commonly spoken languages. Among US families in general, 22% of children speak a language other than English at home, with Spanish, Chinese, Tagalog, Vietnamese, French, Korean, and Arabic that are all spoken by over 1 million speakers. When we look specifically at Massachusetts, about 20% of students speak a first language that is not English, and 10% are classified as English learners. In our state, Spanish, Portuguese, Chinese, and Haitian Creole are the most commonly spoken languages among English learners. Now, if you've been following the media, you'll know that in March and in April, there was a lot of discourse about inequities that would be exacerbated with the move to school closure and online learning. It's important to note that these inequities are not new. The pandemic, though, has given rise to the awareness of the different ways that schools meet the multiple needs of students and the role of schools in addressing equity and access. It's also important to note that among multilingual learners and families, barriers related to language learning can pose some unique challenges. Meeting the needs of multilingual learners can be especially challenging, as research tells us that they are among the most vulnerable populations. It is also important to keep in mind that multilingual learners are predominantly represented in communities of color, and there are many racial disparities related to COVID-19. All of this brings us to general questions that educators have been asking themselves. What is the role in health, safety, and well-being? How should we meet students' academic needs? What are our expectations of students and families? And how do we ensure equitable access? As we think about these questions, particularly when we are thinking about what it means to work with multilingual learners, we're brought to the overarching questions of what is the purpose of school and what is equity? So now we will learn from 3 teachers about the works their schools and districts are doing to negotiate these questions and meet the needs of their multilingual learners and families. The first presenter we will hear from is Rani. Rani teaches at the Mandel, which is an inclusion school in the Boston Public School District. A quarter of the students at the Mandel report speaking a language other than English as their first language, and just over 20% of the students are classified English learners, which means they're learning English and receive specific instructional services to support their English language. As I'm sure you all know, Boston Public is a large school district, and so Rani is going to set the stage for distance education, talking about how Boston mobilized to address challenges of a rapid shift to remote teaching and instruction, with a particular focus on what these challenges are like in kindergarten, with a school that serves a lot of multilingual families. So Rani, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you for the introduction, Dr. Leider. Hello, everyone. My name is Rani Pan, and I am a double terrier, getting both my undergrad and grad degrees at BU Wheelock. I'm also a first-year inclusion teacher from the magical Mendel Elementary, teaching kindergarten remotely during this COVID crisis. First-year teaching definitely brings its difficulties, and the COVID crisis has brought many challenges. But our community is starting to acknowledge some of the successes that have come about, and we're here today to celebrate those successes. This is a picture of some of my students and some of the K2 team coming together to celebrate our school secretary for Secretary Appreciation Day. While this took a lot of coordination, students were able to find joy in this one moment. And it just goes to show that there are a lot of things to celebrate in this difficult transition to remote learning. There are a lot of bright spots in these dark times. Next slide, please. So for Boston Public, the day was Friday, March 13th, that Mayor Marty Walsh announced that school would be closed from March 17th to April 27th. That's 6 whole weeks of no school. We definitely knew that this closure was coming. We just didn't know when or for how long, and definitely we didn't expect that it would be this long. And just to give you some perspective, this is the part of the year where kindergartners are gearing up for first grade. They're developing skills for independent reading, math problem solving, and general social skills amongst their peers. All of these opportunities to grow as learners and as humans were taken away in this moment. My first thought in hearing all of this was what this meant for my students with high needs. Those who depended on school not only for academics, but for basic things like food or clothes, or services like occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech, language, and counseling service, or just in general for emotional support and love. Thankfully, Boston Public Schools were thinking about this too. They first and foremost answered to these needs by putting out food resources like food sites or food delivery services. They also connected families with basic essentials through Cradles to Crayons and other programming, and connected families with housing supports and internet phone supports to be able to stay connected. And I think the biggest reason why home learning has been so successful recently is because Boston Public immediately invested in 20,000 Chromebooks, given out free of charge and with tech support. They also connected families with internet through Comcast programming and distributed hotspots. We as a school, the Magical Mendel, mobilized fast. We had one day, that Monday, to prepare, and in that one day, we pushed to connect with families about the situation and let them know that we were there for them during this difficult time. Through our climate director and crisis support team, we ourselves connected families with resources and distributed academic materials, which included Chromebooks that we had in-house. For that week and the next week, we pushed out curriculum, sure, but our main focus was continuing to support families' physiological needs, provide tech support to connect them to the online learning platform, which in our case is Clever for educational games to support learning, and Google Classroom, and continued to be patient, flexible, and transparent with our families as we continued to learn about what it really meant to do remote learning. Next slide, please. So as I said, we were able to distribute Chromebooks and get families connected with internet, but much of kindergarten learning is hands-on with academic materials. This includes manipulatives to count, stencils to trace, and other physical tools that really enhance learning. On that one day, my co-teacher and I created learning kits with materials such as whiteboards, Play-Doh, cube counters, and other things that students could use to enhance learning at home, but also to use in conjunction with remote instruction. While some students and families were able to pick up these learning kits on that Monday, others could not. And so to address this issue, I and some other teachers did a drive-by drop-off, not only to distribute materials, but also to connect with students one last time before only seeing them through a screen. Secondly, kindergarten is mostly guided by adult direction. Modeling, guidance, feedback, students need adult support. So we began our remote learning mimicking what we were doing in the classroom, but we were finding that families are also working, either as essential workers or at home. They couldn't sit side by side with our students. So we began incorporating project-based learning that was influenced by the home environment. We had to think about what do most students have at home and how we can use those resources to enhance learning. In our literacy unit, we're learning about construction and the engineering process in creating and designing. Some projects that we've had students engage in have been writing letters to community heroes, such as nurses and doctors, making signs to advocate for Stand Against Racism Week, making stores inside their houses, and even coronavirus inventions. One student even created a coronavirus vacuum to suck up the coronavirus so she could go back to school again. All of these projects are to get students motivated to create and do and learn on their own. Next, we had to think about academic accountability. How are we making sure that students are still learning and getting ready for the next grade? To give a little bit of guidance, Boston Public Schools outlined both synchronous and asynchronous learning. Synchronous being a live Zoom time for students to interact with peers and receive direct instruction, and asynchronous being activity options that they could do at their own time, matching their home schedule. Both of these are acceptable forms of academic engagement. Next, we had to think about large class sizes on Zoom and the lack of student-to-student connection. We started with Google Hangout, which was disastrous because with 20 or more 5-year-olds all speaking on a platform that would switch speakers is chaotic. So within the first week, we switched to Zoom. because we could see everybody, use the whiteboard feature and annotation tools. We could share our screens, and most importantly, use a mute button. We also learned that only having whole group Zoom is overwhelming for both teachers and students. So we also gave options for small group participation in different subjects, and we asked them to use those materials in our learning kits alongside our instruction. Lastly, family connection. From the get-go, the administration pushed for a teacher-to-family connection as a priority in making sure students were cared for and safe. While many students were connected, a handful of other students were not, and so our climate director and crisis support team would step in to inquire and connect families to resources if need be. In general, Boston Public Schools offers a translation service hotline for teachers to call in for a third-party translator in communicating with multilingual families. For us in kindergarten and early ed, the early ed department has created curriculum for us to push out in both Spanish and English, as well as other languages. In-house, we have staff who are able to translate and connect and serve as point people. I think the biggest challenge that I didn't include on here is the fact that kindergarten is such an intimate grade. Students are building emotional bonds with the teachers and their peers, and ultimately with the concept of school and what school is. There are many ways that we can mimic this component of K2 on Zoom, but there's really no way to replace it. Our biggest loss in all of this is not being able to be in the moment with students as they are discovering who they are as learners and as a human being. Next slide, please. So Boston Public Schools is a very large district and serves such a diverse population of students from schools to schools. My experience as a remote learning teacher is far different from the teacher next door to me. However, in speaking to some of these teachers, I have learned that there are some key takeaways that are universal no matter the population. First, listen to your families. Listening to our families was the biggest principle in our playbook. We told families to be honest and to give us feedback. Our remote learning systems and strategies have changed dramatically and for the better because of our families. We also had to teach our families the routine of school again, similar to when students would come to us in September. When to log on, how to turn in work, and where to find certain resources. We learned that families are essential to home learning. Next, we had to prioritize well-being. We are in a pandemic, and sometimes we forget that. The health of our students and families far outweigh the grades that we give them in this current time. Next, academic triage. We had to cut the excess and think about the standards that we still needed to teach for the rest of the year. We had to think about what skills and content are essential and wrap around and teach those essential skills so that we can prepare students for the next grade level. Communication and transparency. Remember to communicate with your families and stay open about what is going on. This picture in the corner right here is of a town hall that we had with families to go over guidelines that the Boston Teachers Union had come out with weeks later into the COVID crisis. During the session, we were able to inform and calm the anxiety that some families had around home learning. Next, I am blessed to work in such a tight-knit community with teachers and leaders who will do whatever it takes for our community of students and families. My co-teacher is a veteran, and she has gone above and beyond the calling of a lifelong learner and has thrown herself completely into the unknown world of technology for her. And for that, I am so grateful to be in a team that will work together no matter what. I want to close with this quote from a memo that I received from my principal, who has been an empowering and compassionate leader within this crisis. Education breeds confidence. Confidence breeds hope. Hope breeds peace. Confucius. I am proud to say that I truly have never been more confident as a first-year teacher in my abilities to overcome obstacles. This experience, while grim, has given me some hope and gives me some peace of mind for the future to come. Thank you.
Thanks, Rani. You really started to address the multiple ways that schools are continuing to meet the needs of multilingual learners during this pandemic. You highlighted the importance of, first and foremost, addressing our students' safety and well-being. You also touched on the importance of communication with families and how teamwork and collaboration are key always, but especially now. One thing that's important to remember when we're working with multilingual learners is that equity and access means that we also need to be paying attention to supporting their language development and access to content, which is often delivered in English. And so from here, we will learn from Jocelyn. And Jocelyn will build on what Rani has shared, sharing specific ways that Match Charter Public School has addressed needs for multilingual learners. Jocelyn is especially going to touch on unique challenges faced by her students and families, or at Match Charter, the majority of whom are people of color and multilingual, and many of the families of the students at Match Charter are also essential workers. A little more information about Match: there are 3 campuses, an elementary, middle, and high, that serve a total of 1,211 students. 57.9% of the students speak English as an additional language, and 18.7% are classified as English learners, which means they receive specific instruction and support for their English language development. There are 21 languages spoken, with Spanish, Haitian Creole, French, and Portuguese being the most predominant languages in this very multilingual community. Jocelyn, I'll turn it over to you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chris, for the introduction and for inviting me today. My name is Jocelyn Lee, and I am the head of the Language Acquisition Department at Match Community Day Charter Public School in Hyde Park, which is one part of Boston. Our school serves K-1, which is 4-year-olds, through grade 5. In addition to leading my department, I am also a language acquisition teacher, which is what we call an ESL teacher, in grade 5, where I co-teach with several of the grade 5 teachers. I am an educator of 18 years, and I have held many roles during that time, with the most important being 11 years as a classroom teacher. In addition, I am a proud graduate alumni of Wheelock College prior to the BU Wheelock merger, and I am currently an even prouder part-time instructor at BU Wheelock's graduate school in the Language and Literacy Education Department. I'm honored to be here today to share with you just a few insights into our work during this remote learning time. With that said, I would like to remind our audience, as well as myself, that we have only completed 42 days of remote learning, and we are nearing the close of our 9th week. If we were in a regular in-person school year, which began in late August or September, that would be the equivalent of reaching the beginning of November. Here you will notice a photo of some of our beautiful first grade students dressed up for Superhero Day during Spirit Week earlier this year. Next slide, please. On Friday, March 13th, we received the news that our school would be closed for 2 weeks. As we all know, this was later extended, then extended again, and now has been moved to completely remote learning for the remainder of the 2019-2020 school year. Luckily, thanks to our leadership at Match, we had a strong remote learning plan to begin implementing on day 1, which was Monday, March 16th. We hit the ground running the moment that we could. Here I present to you a graphic which was designed and developed by my colleague and peer, Sarah Otto of Confianza. I share this with you because our approach at Match closely mirrored the exact approach that Sarah lays out here for supporting equity for English learners during this pandemic. Comfort. We began by focusing on comforting students and families by making sure all basic needs were met. When I say basic needs, I'm referring to food, shelter, safety, working internet, and some sort of device to use for remote learning. With the support of our incredible mental health team and really every single staff member in the building, we took inventory and distributed resources or connected families with the things that were needed. Communicate. At the same time, we focused on making sure that we had open, accessible lines of communication with every student and family in the language or languages that they preferred. This took many weeks to achieve. Connect. Along with this, we began leveraging our strong relationships with our students and families that were in place even before remote learning began. We work to strengthen these day by day, and we continue to work on these as we speak. Conquer. This word I added to the graphic. Now we use the strong foundation that has been formed to focus on student learning and on helping our students complete their daily assignments. Next slide, please. Our experience after just 42 days. Well, in just 9 weeks, we have completely flipped a switch and changed how we teach. We already know how to teach in person, but now we have been faced with how do we do it online? And how do we serve all of our students in this new space? We are still figuring it out. Along the way, we have faced many challenges, but have also encountered and celebrated many bright spots and successes. Here are a few of the successes. Relationships in every area have grown deeper, student to student, student to teacher, and teacher to teacher. We can confidently say that all or almost all of our students are connected to their classrooms and to learning. We have successfully integrated daily moments of checking in on our students and how they are doing as people, in addition to virtual games like charades, scattergories, taboo, and trivia, just to name a few, to give students moments to play, share, socialize, connect, have fun, and say yes to showing up before the academic content begins. We are putting our heads together as teachers every day to customize learning for our students, tag team reaching all of them, and figure out how to make things better with each day that passes. We do this through team brainstorms, a whatever it takes attitude that I heard Rani also talk about, individualizing support, small groups and one-to-one sessions, and we have spent time explicitly teaching our students how to get ready for remote learning, what to do when participating, and how to know they are done when working on their tasks to help them feel as successful as possible when they engage. Despite this, we still have challenges. Although our students and families are largely resilient, they bear great burdens as they work to engage in remote learning at home. Many of our students are caring for younger siblings while their parents, who are essential workers, go to work. If parents are working from home and/or multiple children in the same household are engaging in remote learning, family members may be sharing devices to make it all happen, which means they all may need to do work at different times of the day. An adult is also often needed to start Zoom or Google Meet and to help find where documents or materials are located online, especially in the youngest grades. It is hard to teach people how to use new technology, period. Now add the fact that you are teaching that exact technology while on it, and you may need to do that in another language. Zoom and remote learning fatigue. We have all experienced this fatigue. It is real. It comes from not being able to really see the faces and bodies and movements of the people you are conversing with, which causes you to work harder to make meaning about what they are saying and how they are feeling. For our multilingual students, they are making meaning by using the words coming out of our mouths and all of the other cueing systems that we provide as teachers. Hand motions, gestures, and everything we do to act out new words and concepts. Now, in this remote learning space, they are trying to make the same meaning each day with much more limited information from the teacher. It is exhausting. Missing the in-person praise. We still praise our students and their work often, but online it is different. We often cannot see them all the time. We may not be sure they hear us. Some of them are embarrassed to turn on their videos. They may not want to show the current state of their hair or their living space. TV and social media. We work daily to help our students manage attending to their remote learning, as well as finding other times to engage in TV and social media usage. This can be very distracting when all things are located in the same place. Lastly, our multilingual learners are engaging in reading, writing, speaking, and listening, but the quantities of these are not the same, often much less, and it is much harder to balance giving all opportunities to all students during synchronous time. Next slide, please. Here is an example of one set of visuals we have used to help students know and understand exactly how to prepare for remote learning and how to participate in remote learning. Shout out to the Lifelong Readers program from which this is borrowed. Visuals are especially important for helping our multilingual students learn new concepts and gain new language. Next slide, please. Dave Hollis said, "In the rush to return to normal, use this time to consider which parts of normal are worth rushing back to." We are very aware that this is our time to notice, innovate, and make change. What do we want to be part of our new normal? Next slide, please. Here are some of our biggest lessons learned in just 42 days. Number one, COVID-19 has been a masterclass in family-student partnerships. We can accomplish nothing without working alongside our families. Number two, school is so much more than just a place for academic learning. This past Saturday, during the Graduate Together TV special, LeBron James said, "School is a place to support you, protect you, feed you, and act as a safety net." I could not agree more. Number three, social emotional learning needs to be woven into everything. Teachers need to be trained on how to make this happen and what it looks like in this time of a global pandemic where everyone is experiencing trauma. Number four, we will need mental health professionals in our schools more than ever. School psychologists, school counselors, directors of mental health, social workers. These will become some of the most essential personnel in schools. We will need their expertise to guide us and support us in serving all students and families. Number five, we all need to continue to grow our digital literacy. We need to incorporate technology more into our teaching. We need to explicitly learn how to run remote learning spaces in the best way possible. The in-person classroom does not directly translate. Number six, language learning is different right now, but language learning is happening. Although students may not be developing their English skills in the same way, they may be strengthening their skills in the other languages that they speak. This is beautiful and important and necessary. Number seven, when kids and adults have space to be independent, make choices, innovate, and create, they do just that. We need to give education professionals more time and more voice to innovate and create. Great things are coming from these spaces. Lastly, number eight, teachers are a school's greatest asset, and they always will be. Major shout out to every single teacher at Match and really every teacher around the world. This is some of the hardest work, and we have not given up yet. Thank you.
Thanks, Jocelyn. You touched a lot on the instructional considerations, particularly around how students are relearning to do school again in this new environment and what that means for us as teachers. It's kind of funny to think that it's November when we think about the timeline. In many ways, we have to reteach ourselves new ways to do things, especially when it comes to providing language and literacy support for multilingual learners. Along with this includes the challenge of working with parents to learn how to navigate school online. And with multilingual families, this is happening in another language, and it can be a language that they might not be as comfortable in. Finally, Jocelyn, like Rani, highlighted the importance of relationships and community in all this work. So from here, we're going to transition and now learn from Emily Blitz, who will talk specifically about multilingual learners in high school. It's important to note that the population Emily is going to talk about, while there are many shared similarities between what you've learned about from Rani and Jocelyn, there's a uniqueness and urgency about high school multilingual students, especially those that are newcomers and students with limited and interrupted formal education. Newcomers are immigrant students who've been in the US for less than 3 years, and students with limited and interrupted formal education, or SLIFE students, are students who've had interrupted and limited formal schooling. Emily will talk specifically about these challenges, but a few things about Somerville High to know is that this high school serves 1,215 students, 58% of which report English as not their first language. This year, 14% are classified English learners receiving ESL services, and 30% are former English learners. It's worth mentioning that according to research in Massachusetts, 1 in 3 English learners don't graduate on time, and 1 in 7 drop out of school entirely. The last thing I want to share is that the majority of English learners at Somerville High have interruptions in their academic history, and this year, 50 of the 176 current English learners are newcomers, the majority of whom are SLIFE. And these are the specific challenges that Emily is going to speak about. So Emily, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Chris. Hi, everybody. I'm Emily Blitz. I'm the Department Chair for English Learner Education at Somerville High School. And in that role, I'm overseeing the academic programming for English learners at our school. I'm also a teacher, and like Jocelyn, I've been a teacher of English learners for many years before taking on a leadership role. At Somerville High this year, I'm teaching a beginning literacy class for students with interrupted formal schooling. And I'm also co-teaching a seminar course for students in our GOAL program. The GOAL program is pretty unique, and I think it deserves a mention in that it offers an alternative pathway to graduation for English learners who enter our school overage and undercredited. So these students begin their high school experience at Somerville High, and then they ultimately earn their diploma in the Adult Diploma Program at Scale, which is our Somerville Center for Adult Learning Experiences. And we have a graduate coming up to celebrate in the next couple of weeks. The students that I'm working closely with this year have really inspired my remarks today, and I'm glad that I'm able to represent them here. Next slide, please. So as Chris mentioned, I'm going to focus on high school newcomers and SLIFE. SLIFE are our students with limited or interrupted formal education. And what we're seeing with this specific population during the COVID-19 pandemic and remote learning experience. But first, I just want to give a little bit of background and context on these students. So as Chris mentioned, at Somerville High School, we have 50 students currently in our newcomer cohort. They're in our ESL 1 course, which is for students who are really just beginning their journey to learn English. And 46 out of those 50 students are also in a pre-algebra course for math, which suggests that they entered high school below grade level in math. An overwhelming majority of the English learners in our program are considered SLIFE, students who have interruptions in their formal schooling, and this cohort definitely follows that trend. So what's unique to newcomers and SLIFE students in high school? First of all, most of these students are in their first year of school in the United States and their first year living in a new country. This has meant so many adjustments and changes over the course of the past year. They're navigating a new city, a new climate, culture, language, a new school, and a new living situation that almost always involves an experience of either family separation or family reunification, or in many cases both. So that's a lot to juggle already. These high school students are also managing adult responsibilities. Some are unaccompanied students who are really here completely on their own, and many students, regardless of their living situation and support structures, are working full-time to support family members both here and in their home countries, as well as contributing to their household in other ways. So with our newcomers and SLIFE in particular, we have a real sense of urgency when it comes to high school education. Just like any other high school student, these students need to master high school math, English language arts, and science in order to pass the MCAS exams. They also need to pass all of their courses to fulfill the same local and state graduation requirements. And students with interruptions in their schooling need even more time on learning to achieve this. There's just no way around it. There's also just a sense of urgency to learn English, since this means more opportunities for work and social life, more independence, easier access to information and resources, and so much more. Especially when we're looking at the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the economy and unemployment, credentials such as a high school diploma and fluency in English really matter even more for students who need to work to support their families. The extended school closure and remote learning experience have definitely set our students back on their educational journeys, and that has been a real concern for the educators in our program. Next slide, please. So certainly many of the challenges of remote learning that Rani and Jocelyn highlighted in their presentations are also present for high school SLIFE and newcomers. For example, the basic needs, the barriers to communication, and concerns about physical and mental well-being are definitely part of what makes this experience difficult for our students. I mentioned already that many students have adult responsibilities on top of schooling and are now, given the economic crisis, we have a lot of students who were able to maintain employment but are now working around the clock, picking up extra shifts when they can in order to support their families. In addition to those challenges, we also have to consider that we have students who are relatively new to our community, and they may not have fully connected and formed strong relationships with our staff and other students before the closure. We enroll new students every day of the year, which is really very typical in English learner education. And we've even enrolled 3 new students since we started remote learning. But for those of our newest students, forming relationships and maintaining connection to a community that was really still new and developing to them has been a challenge remotely. We also have to talk about the fact that students who were just beginning to settle into new schedules, routines, academic expectations when school was in session are now faced with yet another adjustment while learning takes place remotely. So this has involved, of course, the reorganization of schedules, the need to learn new organizational systems and time management, and norms for academic communication. These are skills that we really work on with students in our newcomer program when school's in session, just as part of their adjustment to school, and now they're kind of trying to manage it all from home. Another huge barrier, which I know has been mentioned, is technology literacy. For our students, it's a real challenge because many are new computer users, and we're really just starting to get their feet wet with learning technology that we use in our schools before the extended closure. And even though we were able to give out devices and we've been working on getting everyone internet access, as Jocelyn pointed out, teaching the tech with the tech has been extremely difficult. And we really do feel for our students who are reaching that frustration level with technology before they even get to access their assignments. Another challenge we've identified is opportunities to develop oral language skills in English. So in the face-to-face classroom setting, this is a huge focus area of ours, and it's really much harder to achieve remotely to the same degree. We're doing it, we're using tools such as Google Meet and Linked, but students aren't getting the same exposure and amount of practice with English as they would be in school. And then just a final point that may seem obvious, but all of these challenges I just discussed are being navigated in a new language, and I give our students a ton of credit for all that they're doing to make this work. Next slide, please. So I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't bring up what this experience has been like for all of our amazing teachers. I'm so lucky to work with such an incredible team of educators who are so committed to doing whatever it takes to make this experience work for our students. But doing this work is certainly not easy. So some of the challenges we have faced, some of you've heard before from some of my colleagues, like every teacher, researching and implementing new technologies for instruction and communication was definitely a learning curve. And as I mentioned before, maintaining connections with students we were really just beginning to get to know has its challenges. We've all had to adjust to new schedules, and the way that we're pacing instructional delivery that really looks different has been a learning curve. And a really, really big consideration for our population of newcomers and SLIFE has been sourcing or developing appropriate instructional materials to deliver learning instruction remotely. There are so many resources out there right now. They're all free, but it's still really difficult to find the right online resources that are at the appropriate language and literacy levels for our students, but are also really age appropriate for our young adult learners. And then finally, Jocelyn touched on this a little bit, but providing the right instructional supports that are really needed for newcomers and SLIFE remotely has been a challenge. So much of our work relies on the in-person, face-to-face connections, hands-on learning experiences, manipulatives, the in-the-moment adjustments that every teacher makes, peer and native language supports. I could go on and on. We're working through it. We're finding new ways to kind of build in those scaffolds and supports that our students need, but it has been a challenge to do it in all of these new ways. So our response as educators basically can be summed up with one word, and that's teamwork. From the beginning of this experience, our teacher teams have been true collaborators in everything from student outreach, tech support, curriculum development, technology, sharing new research, and really just being a support system for one another, because it's been a really difficult time for all of us. We've done the best to align our work so that the student experience is coordinated and as streamlined as it possibly can be. So we're trying to use similar platforms, similar approaches, formats for assignments to build in that consistency for students who need it most. And we're really also fortunate to work closely with an incredible team of multilingual support staff. We have counselors, liaisons, and folks who coordinate wraparound services, academic support, and after-school programming. They've all been an integral part of our team, and really one of the reasons we've been able to engage so many students in remote learning. Educator collaboration was always an important feature of our program in Somerville, but this crisis has taken it to the next level, and we're really excited about what we see as the possibilities to keep going with this in the future. Next slide, please. Okay, so after all I've shared with you, what are some of our key takeaways after 9 weeks of remote learning with newcomers in life in Somerville? First and foremost, our city, our school leaders, and our community partners have our backs. And this is where I really need to give a huge shout out and a lot of love to my city, the city of Somerville, for the incredible work our mayor and city leaders are doing in response to this crisis. Our city has taken quite an aggressive stance to fight the spread of the virus and also to support every single member of our community through this. Just as a quick example, at the very beginning of the crisis, the city formed an immigrant services unit, which brings together folks from the government, city government, public schools, health and social services, community partners, with the sole purpose of learning about and working to address the needs of our immigrant community. And I'm not on this team myself, but from what I'm seeing from my perspective, the school and community partners who are working directly with our families and students are identifying the needs, and the city is responding as fast as they can to put the systems and resources and supports in place. It's really been amazing to watch. Our school leadership has also been all in through this crisis, and I can't think of one moment during this experience when a concern we raised wasn't addressed or a question was left unanswered. For educators who care deeply for our students and families, feeling this support from our city and school leaders and this commitment to get everyone through this crisis has meant the world to us. And more practically, it's given us the ability to really just focus our time on the academics. So thank you, Somerville. Thank you, SPS. And I think I've mentioned it a few times before, but our educators are amazing. I can't say enough about the dedication, the commitment, the creativity, and the heart that goes into their work every single day. So thank you, teachers. Our multilingual staff members are our greatest asset. The relationships that they've formed with students and families have allowed us to learn more quickly about what the support needs are and then to help fill them, and then have enabled us to engage and connect with students in a way that's vital to our work now more than ever. Our students and our families are resilient. As you've heard about, our students have been through a lot, lots of transitions, lots of setbacks, lots of changes before this one. And they are showing a ton of courage and resilience through this experience, and it inspires us all every day. Another important takeaway is how much we all depend on the internet and technology for communication and learning. Many people have been saying that the internet really needs to become a basic utility that no one should go without. It's certainly been vital during this time for communication and access to schooling, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. So there's just something to think about there. It goes without saying, we've learned a lot and we still have a lot to learn. We're really trying to approach this experience in Somerville with that teacher as researcher hat, like trying a lot of new things, reflecting on what's working well, what didn't work, what to try next. So it's been a creative space for teachers. I mean, really, we had no choice, but I think a lot of good can come of this in the long run. And that leads me to my last point. I really firmly believe that the way we do school will never look the same as the result of our experiences during the crisis. And I think that really could be a good thing. Certainly lots of eyes are being opened to the reality of the challenges and barriers that English learners and families in our immigrant communities are facing every day. And we really can't go back and unsee what we've learned. I believe that as a result, we're going to keep getting better. We're going to discover that there are new ways to support our newcomers and SLIFE students in and out of school like we've done through this crisis. We're going to prioritize teaching technology in our program no matter what. We're going to have to think about ways to offer more flexibility for students who are working full-time and going to school, and hopefully continue to expand our alternative pathways to graduation as well. I'm sure I've taken up more than my allotted time by now, so I think I'll just wrap it up there. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll send it back to you, Chris.
Thank you, Emily. It was really great to hear about the work you're doing in Somerville and at Somerville High. You highlighted the specific challenges that are faced by high school multilingual students, especially those that are newcomers and SLIFE students, and there really is an urgency around this. I think some of the big things we can take away from your presentation is that multilingual staff matter and are so important in this work. You really highlighted how newcomers face competing priorities to financially support their families, but also needing a high school degree and or improved English in order to have access to a job, something that I think is especially important right now when we're thinking about the current unemployment rate. Finally, a major takeaway is the importance of a strong community school partnership in highlighting how the city of Somerville mobilized to meet the needs of the immigrant community in your city. You bring us back full circle to what Rani was saying at the beginning of the presentation regarding community school relationships. And I really loved what you said at the end about thinking about like how we do school can change, right? And so with that, I want to return to the slide from earlier, where I shared the questions that educators have had to ask themselves as they've made decisions in response. It's important to remember that we are still in the pandemic, and this moment in history can have lasting impact on school, particularly for our most vulnerable students, which includes multilingual learners. Comes to thinking about the role in health, safety, and well-being, we need to continue to think about what equity means and what it means to support our learners during and after the pandemic. When we think about how we should meet students' academic needs, let's take a moment to remember to praise our teachers and parents on the great work that they're doing. We learned a lot from Rani, Jocelyn, and Emily about amazing things their schools, and their districts are doing. And I'd really encourage policymakers and city officials to remember to listen to the voices of teachers and families and students to know what is and isn't working for our students and families, and use that to drive our budget and policy decisions. When we think about expectations of students and families, I think the question of whether remote instruction could change the way we teach forever is a really good question. I think the answer can be yes, and I think the answer should be yes. The pandemic has raised awareness around inequities, and so finally, as we ask ourselves about ensuring equitable access, let's remember that there really is a lot we can learn from all of this. I think we've only begun to show how innovative and resourceful we can be in addressing issues of equity and access. How can we take what we've learned and continue to learn in this era to reflect on what the purpose of school is and what equity means, especially for our multilingual learners and families? So before we turn it over to question and answer, I just wanted to share a few resources. As you've heard today, communicating with students and families in a language other than English can be challenging, especially among newcomers and with families who might speak low incidence languages. Coloring Colorado is a useful website for all things multilingual learners. And right now they have a section of their website dedicated entirely to supporting multilingual learners during this pandemic. The COVID-19 Health Literacy Project is a great resource for accessing information about COVID in multiple languages. One challenge we didn't touch on super deeply today is the challenge of curriculum. For multilingual learners, especially English learners, even before the pandemic, there were already issues around curriculum and instruction and lack of access to rigorous, appropriate, and accessible curriculum for English learners. I wanted to share two resources to help address that. The first is from Jocelyn's school, Match. They have developed a lot of standards-based curriculum designed with English learners in mind, and they're sharing it publicly for free with educators. I also wanted to share information about a project that I work on, the International Consortium for Multilingual Excellence in Education, or ICMEE. ICMEE is a federally funded grant that develops and then offers free online professional development for teachers, specifically for learning more about how to meet the needs of multilingual learners. I wanted to share about ICMEE today because in response to recent events surrounding COVID-19 and shifts in educational needs and delivery, we've developed free supplemental resources to provide schools and school districts with additional support during this time of crisis. Specifically, we've developed learning packets, and these packets are banded by grade levels and designed for students at ELD levels 1 and 2, so like your beginning level students, newcomers. Also, given that our primary focus for this grant is professional development, we're also offering 4 free modules to support educators to think forward, collaborate around, and plan thoughtful engagement with multilingual students and their families during the COVID-19 era. So, with all that, I want to say thank you to all of you for joining us today. I especially want to thank Rani, Jocelyn, and Emily for sharing their experiences and expertise with us. I also want to acknowledge not just Boston Public, Match Charter, and Somerville High, but also the amazing work the cities of Boston and Somerville are doing in collaboration with their local schools and districts. Finally, thank you to BU Initiative on Cities for inviting us to be part of the COVID-19 webinar series, and a special thank you to BU Wheelock for co-sponsoring the event. We're all happy to speak with you further about any of the work that we shared today. You can see here that you have our contact information, and for that, I will turn it over to Q&A.
Hi all. Hi, my name is David again from the Initiative on Cities. And I'm just going to run through some of the questions that we've received. One such question is, we've gotten as we look ahead to next year, and this will go, I think, to all three of our panelists. And maybe we'll start with Emily, and then we'll work our way back from Jocelyn and then to Rani. But what is one thing you wish state or local policymakers were focused on as we look ahead to next year?
Yeah, it's a great question, and thank you for the question. I want to echo what Chris just mentioned in her remarks, that I really hope that policymakers take some time to hear from teachers, multilingual liaisons, paraprofessionals, administrators, and certainly students and families, just to get into the details a little bit more about what this experience has been like as they're making the policies. And I would certainly also hope that folks continue to consider how much we need to rely on the basic needs, the internet, and the devices to do this work remotely.
Emily,
I agree.
or Jocelyn?
Thank you. I agree with Emily. I think we are just four voices about our experiences. So I would encourage policymakers to speak to as many teachers, families, students as possible to hear a wide range of experiences. But I think in addition, we are already as educators hearing so much about school budgets being under strain for next year and for many upcoming years. And I know personally, our school staff is already being impacted for next year, losing 2 key roles that support students and staff and families. While we know that this is inevitable, it's very difficult to do more with less. So I would encourage policymakers to think about the new challenges that have been presented and how we're going to need to focus exclusively on mental health first as a basic need to serve our students and our teachers and our staff. And that requires a lot of professionals, that require a lot of funding. So how can we inevitably deal with these budget cuts, but have enough to give the services that we want to?
Rani, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Sure. I agree with Chris and Emily and Jocelyn in that I really think the voices of families and teachers should be key in deciding what to do with education. I saw a viral picture of a preschool that was recently open, and there were some children at school 6 feet apart in the classroom and in the playground. They were playing in chalk squares, and I think that is very heartbreaking to see. And I feel like in rushing to go back to school, we kind of have to consider what school really means and if we can really do school the way school should be done.
Great, thanks. Before I get to, I think we'll have time probably for one more question. Our panelists, if you click on the Q&A button on the bottom, you'll be able to type answers to those who we might not have time to get to. And to everyone else, you again have everyone's email here, and please don't hesitate to reach out to them if you have any specific questions. But Emily, how are Somerville High teachers navigating the situation that you mentioned where students are working more hours than ever at their job? And what trade-offs do you find yourself making when there aren't just enough hours in the day to incorporate the English exposure necessary to make aggressive language progress? Of course, keeping in mind that health and well-being outweigh academics.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Olivia. Hi, Olivia. Thank you for the question. This has certainly been a huge challenge for us, and our mindset has been, health first, financial security first, family first, and we'll figure out schooling. So we've really individualized it. We've really looked at a student by student, what are the barriers, what are the schedule, what are the need, and how can we work in learning into your schedule, or what do you need to make it happen, or do you need to just take a little step back this week, this month, what have you. So we're really trying to build in that flexibility. Our statement to our students is, we're here, we've got you. When you're ready, we're here. We're always going to be here. If you need to work this week, we'll be here next week. We're going to continue to keep in touch with you, but we're just trying to build in as much flexibility as possible. First of all, just for the exhaustion, the toll that the extra work hours are taking, and all of the stress that it brings into the homes as well. We also have a grading policy that holds students harmless and that allows us to look case by case at the need for exemptions or, special situations so that students are not impacted in their credit bearing and their graduation status readiness.
Great, and I think that's all the time that we have. I do want to just give one plug to our next webinar, which is next week, also Wednesday at 1. We'll be discussing how cities are supporting aging populations with Bronwyn Keith and Antron Watson. Antron Watson is the age-friendly director at the AARP Massachusetts, and Bronwyn Keith is the director of the BU Center for Aging and Disability Education and Research. If you do have any questions, you can go back and see those. You can reach out to our panelists via their emails. This webinar will immediately be available on demand, probably within actually about an hour on Zoom. And it will be immediately available on demand on Facebook Live for on the Initiative on Cities, if you search Initiative on Cities on Facebook. And we'll probably have it up on YouTube by the end of the week. So you can go to the Initiative on Cities YouTube page and you'll be able to view these and you'll be able to view those email addresses. You can just zoom ahead to our fast forward to the final slides with everybody's email addresses as well. And with that, we'll end the webinar. Thank you so much to our panelists. I really appreciate everyone who came out to join us. Thank you again, Emily, Rani, Jocelyn, and Chris. Thanks so much for organizing this. We really, really appreciate and having everybody's insight.